We've been talking about invertebrates. We started down here at the animal kingdom. Remember, things that make an animal be an animal. Multicellular. What else?
Eukaryotic.
Eukaryotic. Heterotrophic. No cell walls, and at some point in time in their life, they're modal. Down here at the simplest animals in our phylogenetic tree, we've got a Y here. If they do not have tissues, we're going left in this phylogenetic tree to our most simple group of animals, porifera. Phylum porifera, those are the sponges. If they do have tissues, going over here to the right. If they have tissues and have radial symmetry, we're at that group right there. Anybody know what that group was? What's the second most simple group of animals? Cnidarians, like jellyfish. If we go this branch, we get to animals that have 3 germ layers and no body cavity. We go over here to what are called the acoelomates. What group are we talking about there? The other major group we've talked about in these things. Speak up. Which worms? Flatworms, also known as platyhelminthes. Now we're going to go this way. If they have a body cavity, we're going to keep going to the right. We're going to go over here to these guys who have what's called a pseudocoelom. They have a body cavity, but it's made between 2 germ layers, the endo and the mesoderm. And the group that we started talking about the other day, that we're going to concentrate on some today, is called nematoda. These are roundworms. So I'm going to stop there. Switch back over to the other presentation. Just some reminders about nematodes. First of all, like we said, they're roundworms. They are by far the most common multicellular organism on Earth. So there's a lot of them. In a shovel full of dirt, there are thousands and thousands, maybe millions, of roundworms. They have 3 germ layers. They have bilateral symmetry, just like you. They're not segmented. And like we said before, they have a pseudocoelom. They have a body cavity, but it's not made in the usual manner. It's made between 2 germ layers. They have got this rough cuticle, this thick cuticle outside their body. What's it mostly there for? Why would you want a thick kind of coat around your skin if you're a worm? Protection from what? From drying out, from desiccating. Remember, desiccation is the word for drying out. So they got some protection from desiccating. They also have sense organs in their head. We call that cephalization, cephalic. They have a complete digestive system, which runs from mouth all the way to anus. They have some collecting tubules that are sort of like your kidneys to help them get rid of waste, nitrogenous waste out of their blood. And no circulatory or respiratory systems. They're completely dependent on what to move things around in their body? Diffusion and osmosis. Right? They've got a longitudinal nerve to help them sense things. Their sexes are usually separate. They're not typically hermaphroditic. A lot of them are free-living, but also there's many famous parasites in this group. And they have a hydrostatic skeleton, which means water helps to hold their shape in place. Water pressure. There's just some examples of different kinds of human parasites. Hookworms we talked about the other day, you get from how?
Walking with their feet.
Yeah, they burrow in through your feet and get into your intestines and your bloodstream. Pinworms, you get through what's called the oral fecal route, which basically means somehow you get eggs in your body from somebody's poop. Typically it's little kids at daycares that pass these around. What about trichinella? How do you get that? Undercooked pork. These worms get in the muscle of certain animals and make larvae. And if you eat that muscle, it's not cooked good, you can get it. Heartworms are mostly a dog thing, and they get them how? Mosquito bites. Yep. Transmitted by mosquitoes. Elephantiasis and river blindness you also can contract through insect bites, mostly in tropical areas. The worms in elephantiasis, what part of your body do they invade? The lymph vessels. And their main job is to do what? Collect liquids that have leaked out of where? Your blood, and eventually put it back into the blood. But these worms clog those up. So what happens? You swell. That water just pools and you swell, and it can't be good. Nematodes also cause a lot of plant diseases, but remember that most are free living, really, really common, good things, because what's their main job? What's their main role in the environment? Yep. Mineral recyclers. Help to decompose things. Looked at most of these already. I want to backtrack a little bit. The second main group we want to look at today is this one, mollusca. Mollusks. Phylum mollusca. The word here means soft body. And if you think about the animals in this group, you'll know why. We're talking about things like snails and slugs, clams, oysters, octopus, and squid. Get those soft bodies. They, like you, have bilateral symmetry for the most part. Usually they're unsegmented, and most have a head. Although like a clam and a scallop would be exceptions to that rule. There are a few that don't really have a head. Their ventral body wall, which is their belly side, is sometimes called the foot, because this helps them to move. Think about a snail or a slug. Think about a clam. It's got this little hatchet-like thing that it sticks outside the shell to help it move. That's the foot. Their dorsal wall, or their back wall, is called the mantle. And this basically encases their body. It also, in some of them, will become the gills or the lungs, helps to make those. And in the ones that have a shell, it helps to make the shell. It actually secretes the shell. They do have a body cavity. They're coelomates. Their body cavity is similar to yours. It's made from the mesoderm. But it's mainly just around the heart. They don't have a lot of organs. They're fairly simple. Their digestive system is complete, from mouth to anus. A lot of them have this little tongue-like thing. My marker's just not going to work today. They have this little tongue-like thing called the radula. It looks sort of like a chainsaw. We'll look at a picture of it in a minute. And that helps them to scrape food, like plant matter. They have an open circulatory system, which is a little bit different. At least they have a circulatory system. That's an advancement. But they basically have a heart, a couple of major blood vessels. When that heart pumps, the blood basically just bathes their organs. It goes into their body cavities and bathes their organs. From around here, buddy. You have, on the other hand, not an open circulatory system. You have what? Have closed, which means your blood never does what? Never leaves the blood vessels. Things go in and out by diffusion, but the blood cells themselves, unless you have cut or damage, stay in. They do have these structures called metanephridia. Anytime you see that word nephro, it's a lot like a kidney. It helps them to get rid of nitrogenous waste from their body. Notice it says it opens into the pericardial cavity. What that word means, pericardial. Help me out here. Pericardial, what would that mean? What's peri mean? Like perimeter. Around. And cardial means the heart. So it's a cavity around the heart. They do have somewhat of a nervous system. They have these structures called ganglia. Ganglia are nerve clusters, sort of like primitive what? Primitive brains. Not very smart, except there's a couple exceptions to that. Cephalopods, which is one group of mollusks. Mainly here we're talking about octopus and squid. Octopus and squid, they've got a pretty advanced brain. Most scientists think they're the smartest invertebrates. They can be trained to do certain kinds of things. A lot of them also have pretty good senses. They have senses of touch, smell, taste, balance or equilibrium, and like the octopus and the squid, they have pretty good eyesight. Well-developed eyes. In some cases, maybe better than ours. There's three main classes in this phylum: gastropods, bivalves, and cephalopods. That word gastropod, by now you guys know, means stomach, foot. These are things like snails and slugs, crawl in their stomach. They're the most diverse group. They're usually kind of sluggish, you know that, moves like a slug. Sedentary means what? What would sedentary mean? If I said Drew's kind of sedentary, what would I be saying? I mean, he doesn't move much, just sort of sits around, right? A lot of them, of course, have the heavy shells that slow them down. Bivalves, the second class, that term means two-shelled. So these are like your clams and your mussels and your oysters. Again, most of them are sedentary, and they're filter feeders. They actually pull water in, sort of like a sponge, filter out nutrients, go from there. But unlike most of the other things in phylum Mollusca, they don't have a head. They also typically don't have that radula, that rasping kind of chainsaw-like tongue. And since they don't have a head, it's kind of hard to have cephalization without a head. They don't have many sense organs in their head, obviously. And then the cephalopods, that term means head foot. These are like the octopus and the squid, also the nautilus. They're all marine, all ocean dwellers. They're typically pretty active predators. They'll eat things like lobsters, other kinds of crustaceans. Their foot is real near their head, and basically, though, the way they move is they suck in water and spray it out. They move by a form of jet propulsion. And as I was saying, we're talking about things like squid, octopus, and the nautilus, and the cuttlefish. All examples of these. Here's, I guess this is a snail. Yeah, this is supposed to be his head right here. This is a close-up of his tongue. This chainsaw-like structure, that's his tongue. Comes to scrape plant matter to eat. It's called the radula. Notice here's his stomach. He's got a complete digestive tract, from mouth all the way to anus, back in the back. Here's his heart. Notice how the blood vessel just sort of dead ends there. When his heart pumps, that blood just sort of bathes the organs. And then when it relaxes, the blood gets pulled back in, pushed back out again. He breathes through gills. The oxygenated blood goes to the heart and gets pumped out from there. Notice he does have a body cavity. That's in blue, and that's his coelom. Here's a clam. Notice down here's his foot. Breathes through gills. Back in the back, you can see the mantle, which makes his shell. He's got a heart, which sort of dead ends again. He's got a couple of muscles called adductor muscles, which help to open and close the shell, and a complete digestive tract from mouth all the way to anus. All right, one more main group I want to talk about today is one we haven't mentioned much yet. And that's a group called Annelida. That term Annelida means little rings. That's what the word actually means, little rings. These are the segmented worms. These are the earthworms and the leeches mainly. There's also a lot of marine versions of this, sea worms, ocean worms. They're the first group that we've talked about that's been segmented. What's the big advantage of being segmented? Help me out here. Advantage of being segmented. Yeah, it lets you move in lots of different ways. You're segmented. All your joints, segments. They have these hair-like structures also, the annelids do. Sometimes it's spelled with a CH. Sometimes it's spelled like this, S-E-T-A-E, seedy. These help them to move. They basically anchor them in the ground as they're moving. So they're hair-like projections that help them to move. Yeah. You guys ever, when you've been fishing with worms, you ever felt how the bottom of an earthworm, the ventral side, the belly, is sort of rough? Feels like sandpaper? Anybody ever noticed that? Next time you go fishing with some earthworms, feel the belly side. What you're feeling are these little hairs that help them to move. The annelids are triploblastic, just like you. 3 germ layers in their gastrula. They have a true body cavity made from mesoderm, just like you. They're protostomes, which means that blastopore, the opening into the gastrula, becomes the mouth. You're not a protostome. What are you? You're deuterostome, mouth second. They're mouth first. They have this structure called a cerebral ganglion. It's not really a brain, but it's a cluster of nerves. It's like a primitive brain. And from that branches a ventral nerve cord. Do you have one of those? You have a ventral nerve cord. Help me out. What do you have? You have a dorsal nerve cord, right? Yours is on your back. Ventral's on the belly. So their nerve cord is on their belly side. They have 2 main blood vessels. One on the belly, ventral, one on the back, dorsal. And we saw some kind of video in here the other day about this. You've got these things called aortic arches, which are like hearts. They have 5 pairs of these things. Actually, they got like 10 hearts, 10 pumping blood vessels that help to pump blood through their body system. Most of this I think we've already covered on the other slide, but we'll look at it. Bilateral symmetry, just like you. They're segmented. They, like you, also have a closed circulatory system. Blood never leaves the blood vessels. Things diffuse in and out, but the blood stays in. They have a coelom, a body cavity, and what's called a hydrostatic skeleton. We just talked about that word a minute ago. It means water pressure helps to hold their body shape in place. No bones or anything like that. It's just water pressure. Depending on the kind of annelid we're talking about, they breathe in different ways. Earthworms breathe through their skin. It's called cutaneous breathing. They breathe through the skin. What does that mean the skin always has to be like? Wet and for gases to be able to diffuse through something, it has to be thin and moist. So that's why when an earthworm gets caught out on a sidewalk, what actually kills the earthworm? Yeah, but what kills him? He can't breathe. Because his skin dries out, he can't breathe. Because for gases to be able to diffuse through a membrane, that membrane has to be thin and moist. As soon as his skin dries out, he's going to die very quickly. Some of them, especially the marine ones, have gills. So a lot of these live in the ocean. It depends on the species. They have these structures called nephridia in each segment, which are sort of like their kidneys. Help them to get rid of ammonia and other nitrogenous waste in their body. They've got a complete digestive system. How many of you dissected an earthworm in biology class? Well, not many. Mostly when you open up an earthworm, mostly what you see is what? Pretty much the only thing you see when you open up an earthworm is the digestive system. It's mostly intestine. This goes from head to tail, the digestive system does. As we said before, they do have a nervous system. I'm using this word brain here very loosely. Ganglion is probably the better word to use there. There's a couple of main classes, actually 3 classes in this group. Oligochaeta are the earthworms. And these have these setae to help them move. They're like bristles. They're scavengers. They're important for the soil, right? They help to decompose things, break down matter. And most earthworms are hermaphroditic. You guys might not know this, but when earthworms mate, who gets pregnant? Both. Yeah, when they mate, they both get pregnant. Kind of strange. There's another group called Polychaeta. And this means they have many bristles. That's many bristles, many seed. These are marine worms. And these bristles basically act like oars, paddles, to help them move through the water. Sometimes they're called parapodia. Okay, yeah. What does para mean? Like a paratrooper, rather? It means like. And what does podia mean? Feet. Like feet. So these bristles are sort of like feet or appendages to help them swim. Parapodia. They have some specialized sense organs, sort of like you. There's a lot of these ocean-dwelling worms. Most of them you probably never heard of before. There's a lot of them out there. Typically, they have separate sexes, male and female, unlike the earthworms. And then the last group we'll mention here are the leeches. Anybody in here ever had a leech? Did you get it in the Flint River?
No, I actually got it in Malaysia.
Oh, wow. So leeches, kind of cool in the fact that when they attach to you, when they bite you, you don't feel it usually, because what do they inject you with? They inject you with stuff to numb you and also stuff to what? Speak over that word. Anticoagulants. Stuff to keep your blood from clotting. It's kind of cool. This is a marine worm. One of the worms in Polychaeta. And notice these long parapodia, these long bristles to help them swim. There's a leech. That's not a very good picture, but it's on somebody's arm. And that's the end of that one. What I've got now to show you guys, I want to talk some about arthropods. And I think I'll actually talk about them here for a minute. I've got a video from the Monsters Inside Me show on TV. I'm going to show you. It's about tapeworms. We'll look at that in a minute. What phylum are the tapeworms in? They're flatworms. Platyhelminthes, flatworms. We'll look at that in a minute. Before we do, let's talk about the most diverse phylum on Earth. Arthropoda, the most diverse phylum, meaning there's more species in this group than in any other. They're the most diverse. Arthropod means what? Jointed foot. Arthro means joints. Jointed foot. Or jointed appendage. An appendage is like an arm or a leg, right? Jointed appendage. As I said, they're the most diverse animal phylum. They're segmented. Like the mollusk, they have an open circulatory system. Unlike you. Fairly simple nervous system. One advancement that what these guys have that a lot of them don't is they have internal fertilization. What's the big deal with internal fertilization? What does it let them do better? Reproduce on land without fear of what? Without fear of what happening to the sperm or eggs. Drying out, right? That internal fertilization is pretty important for that. They have an exoskeleton, outside skeleton, no bones. Their exoskeleton is made of chitin, which we know is what kind of material? It's a sugar, it's a carbohydrate, it's a lot like starch or cellulose. And the members of this group include all our insects, our crustaceans like lobsters, shrimp, and also the arachnids, like spiders and mites. As we said before, they tend to be segmented. They have paired segmented appendages. That's where the name comes from. Bilateral symmetry, just like you, two sides, two mirror image sides. Their exoskeleton has to be shed. What do we call that? molting. Call it molting as they grow. They've got what's called a tubular alimentary canal. That's a word you need to know. Alimentary canal refers to their what? You have an alimentary canal. What is it? It's your digestive tract. It's your GI tract. So know that word. Alimentary canal is your digestive tract. As we said before, their circulatory system is open. So they have a heart and a couple of main blood vessels, and then when the heart pumps, the blood goes out and basically bathes the organs. They do have a coelom, body cavity, but it's sort of small. Their nervous system is mainly consisting of an anterior ganglion. Anterior means what? Front. Head area in most animals. Front. They have a couple of paired nerve cords that run near their alimentary canal, their digestive tract. They have these structures called Malpighian tubules, which are sort of like your kidneys. You get rid of waste out of the blood. They breathe in a lot of different ways. Some breathe with gills. Some have these tubes called trachea. Where's your trachea? What's the more common name for your trachea? The windpipe. Breathing tube. And a lot of them, if you've ever picked up a grasshopper, you probably noticed it has holes in its side, in its exoskeleton, little holes. Those little holes are called spiracles. And these are like these little breathing holes. Air goes into those spiracles. Behind those little holes are these tubes, trachea, and they carry the air into the body. And that's how most insects breathe. These breathing holes called spiracles with tubes that carry that on into their body. In arthropods, the sexes are almost always separate. There's very few that are hermaphroditic. All right, I'm going to leave this here and let you read over this slide for a second while I'm getting the video ready. Like I said, this video that we're going to watch is about tapeworms, which are in phylum Platyhelminthes, flatworms. That's a really cool show, though, if you've never watched it before. All right, let's finish up these arthropods real quick. Okay, so in phylum Arthropoda, let's look at the classes just a little bit. First class, Crustacea, what we call the crustaceans. These are things like our lobsters, our crawdads, crayfish, crabs, shrimp, even pill bugs. Remember the roly-polies, they're in this group too. Pretty diverse group. The main thing you should know about these guys is how they breathe. How do crustaceans breathe? How do pill bugs breathe? Why do they choose the wet over the dry? Gills. Most of these things live in the water, pill bugs being an exception. Most of them live in the water. Like it says here, most are aquatic, most breathe with gills. Pretty common group though. The arachnids, the spiders, the ticks, the mites, and also the scorpions. Also a pretty diverse group. They typically have two segments, two big body segments. What we call the cephalothorax, which means the head and the chest, right? Cephalothorax, head and chest, and then the abdomen. They usually have 6 pairs of appendages, and then 2 mouth parts. No antenna, unlike the insects. Their mouth parts are called chelicera, and these are sort of pincher-like. And of course, in spiders, the third set of those, the third segment becomes the fangs. That's what they bite with. There's some crustaceans. Again, crustaceans have an exoskeleton. They usually have 5 pairs of appendages or legs, 2 pairs of antennae. And you can see some examples: shrimp, crabs, lobsters. There's some arachnids. Again, they have an exoskeleton, typically 4 pairs of legs, no antenna. Ticks, scorpions, and spiders are examples. And then a couple of groups we're not going to say hardly anything at all about here are Chilopoda and Diplopoda. Chilopoda are the centipedes. Centipede, what does that mean? 1,000 legs or 1,000 feet. They don't really have 1,000. I mean, not 1,000, 100. Right? Cent is 100. They don't really have 100. They got a bunch. They have mouth parts, mandible and maxillae. In you, what's your mandible? Which jaw? The lower part. What's your maxillae? Upper jaw. So they have the same kind of thing, lower and upper jaws. They have 1 pair of legs for every segment. 1 pair per segment. They typically are elongated and flattened, usually found in kind of protected places like in the leaves and in the soil and under bark. They usually feed on insects and spiders. There's a lot of myths out there about centipedes can hurt people. Not true. They might bite you, and they do have some venom, but it's not enough to hurt you. Not bees, sort of like a bee sting, like it says up here. Diplopoda, on the other hand, are millipedes. And instead of having 1 set of legs per segment, they have 2 sets per segment. So they have more legs. Their name means 1,000 legs. 1 pair of antennae. Typically, these centipedes are flat. These are more rounded. They look more like worms. Most millipedes, as it says here, are scavengers. They eat dead stuff, decaying material. There are a few that are parasites on plants, not typically. They don't bite people. But they can, now this is sort of cool, they can give off this fluid when they're attacked that has cyanide in it. And if you were to put them in a jar, and with like another bug, that gas that they're giving off is toxic enough to kill the insect in the jar with them. It's like chemical weapons. Pretty cool. So this is a millipede up top, and this is a centipede down the bottom. Last group is class Insecta, the most diverse animal class in the world. Insects have 3 main tagmata. That's just another name for body section. 3 main body sections: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. They typically have 1 pair of antennae, 3 pairs of legs. Where are those legs all attached? Which tagmata, which segment? Head, thorax, or abdomen? Thorax. Yep. A lot of them have wings. So they're either 1 or 2 pairs of wings. As we said before, they're the most abundant life form known to science. There's at least 1 million species of insects. That's a lot of different kinds of insects. It's more than all the other animals put together. And remember that insects are not just things like ants. They're also wasps, termites, grasshoppers, beetles, mosquitoes, and we could keep going forever. But the key things to know about them: 3 tagmata, 3 main body sections, head, thorax, and abdomen, 1 pair of antennae, 3 pairs of legs. There's just some common insects. Butterflies I didn't mention earlier, moths, flies. And again, remember that insects have an exoskeleton, 3 pairs of legs, 1 pair of antennae. And that is a good place to call it a day.